This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, welcome everyone. Good Erev Shabbos Rabosai. Want to welcome all of our listeners on J-Root Radio. We want to welcome all of our Torah Anytime viewers, and of course, the exceptional audience that we have over here in Young Israel of Kew Garden Hills, New York. Okay, so we're already holding Erev Shabbos, Shabbos HaChodesh. So we're going to speak a little bit about Pesach, Haba Aleinu L'Tova. We're going to say in the Haggadah, the Chazal Darshan, the Pasuk, V'avarti b'Eretz Mitzrayim b'Layla Hazeh, I will pass over. You get it? Pass over? Okay. V'avarti b'Eretz Mitzrayim b'Layla Hazeh, I will pass over the land of Egypt on this night. V'hikesi kol b'char b'Eretz Mitzrayim, I will smite every firstborn in Mitzrayim v'chol Elohei Mitzrayim es Shvatim, and all the gods of Egypt, I will perform judgments. Ani Hashem, and of course the Baal Haggadah, quoting from the Mecholta Darshans, V'avarti b'Eretz Mitzrayim b'Layla hazeh, Ani v'loi Malach, V'hikesi kol b'char b'Eretz Mitzrayim, Ani v'loi Saraf, V'chol Elohei Mitzrayim es Shvatim, Ani v'loi Shliach, Ani Hashem, Ani hu v'loi Acher. Well, the first thing that it's worthwhile to point out is that there's a very interesting ancient text of the Haggadah that, as an introduction to this section of the Haggadah, brings the Medrash. Now, I don't think any of you use such a Haggadah, but in Provence, in France, which I'm not sure that I recommend visiting right now, they would say this version of the Haggadah. They would say a Medrash that says like this. You have it in number 2. It's quoted in the Machzor Vitri. In Machzor Vitri in Hilchos Pesach, he brings down Amru Chachamim Kisheyarad Riboin Ha'olam, when God descended, Yardu Imai Tishim Alfei Revavos, 90,000 myriads of malachim. Now, what's 90,000 times 10,000?
90 million.
Right?
10,000 times 10,000 is 10 million.
90,000 times 10,000.
90 million.
Oh, it's a lot, right? Mehem Malachei Eish. You had some angels of fire. Mehem Malachei Baran. You had angels of hail. Mehem Malachei Chavola. Angels of destruction. Reses v'chalchala chazachol misharoy oisam. Trembling and trepidation would grip anyone who would see them. Amru lefanav. Ribono shel olam. Hine lanu. Hanach lanu. Basically, let us do our job, and let us go down and destroy the Egyptians. So they requested from God to be able to destroy Mitzrayim. Omar lohem, God said, not so fast, hanichu li, let me alone, ve'esa ritzayin banai, so I can do the will of my children. Amru lefanav, they said before God, Ribono shel olam, haloi melech basar v'dam, but a king of flesh and blood, shabarasa ba'olamech, that you create in your world. When he goes to war, his officers, his servants surround him and protect him so that he's not physically harmed. So likewise, we want to go down so you, God, will not be harmed. V'ata melech malchei hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu, dinhu shana v'decha, we are your servants, v'heim Yisrael b'nei brischa, and they are the Jewish people. Neireid v'nasin akamasam, let's do the job. Amar lohem, God said, Lein neskara daiti, I will not be appeased at she'erid ani ba'atzmi, until I do the job myself. So this is a perfect introduction to this section on the Haggadah, that v'avarti v'hikesi ese ani Hashem ani v'loi him ani v'loi that ani v'loi this one, right? Now, what's the problem? Why do we not say this gersa in our Haggadah? So the Machzor Vitri, who by the way was a student of Rashi, the Machzor Vitri says, Eino miseder Haggadah. This is not part of the regular order of the Haggadah. Ve'eno ksiv b'mechilton. It's not written in the Mechilton. Shar divrei Haggadah ksuma divrei Arami Ovid Avi. It's not written in the Mechilta along with the regular text of the Haggadah. However, says the Machzor Vitri, it's more problematic than that. There is a line in it which is somewhat troubling, and that is the Malachim say to God, God, just like when a king of flesh and blood goes to war, his servants surround him so that he's not physically harmed, so too we want... Well, how is that relevant to God? God cannot be physically harmed. So the argument they try to use to be able to go down themselves does not apply to the Ribbon Shalom. To God, we know it says, Haid v'hadar lefanav. So therefore, says the Master Vitri, Lefikach eino ikar, this medrash is not really correct. Ve'ein Rabbi Ragil Imrei, my Rabbi Rashi would not say it. And besides that, it also interrupts in the drasha of Ayetzeinu Hashem Elokeinu, and it sort of interrupts until we get around to darshan these psukim. Therefore, it's a riboy dvarim, and you should not say it. Now, the Machzavitchu says in Eretz Yisrael they made a gzeira not to say this part of the Haggadah, but in Provence the minhag was to say it. Okay, that's just by way of introduction. But what I really want to speak about this morning is this idea, where not only does God say, I'm the one who passed over your land, I'm the one who smote the firstborn, I'm the one who killed the Egyptian gods, I and not anyone else. So first of all, why him and not anybody else? Why couldn't God send malachim? You know, every boss knows that the most important delegation is the key to success. You have to be able to entrust other people to do jobs. Otherwise, you see, that's the key to success. You have other people do the hard work, and you cash in, right? You take the credit. You take the credit. So, and why doesn't the Ribbon Shalom have malachim do the jobs? He has malachim. He does send them on jobs. There's someone called Michael, Gabriel, Raphael. So why couldn't he send them to take them out of Mitzrayim? So, and besides that, Rabbi Isai, besides the fact that obviously God wanted to do it himself, what's this emphasis? Ani. Why emphasizing so much? And what does it mean? V'loi malach. What does it mean? V'loi saraf. What does it mean? V'loi shliach. And who's the acher? In other words, not a malach, not a saraf, not a shliach. Who's this mysterious acher that didn't take us out of Mitzrayim?
Well, why doesn't he just say acher?
And whoever it was, just say who he is. Ani v'loi malach, ani v'loi sarah, ani shliach, and ani v'loi Friedman. You know, like, who's this acher?
All of the laws are redundant.
Well, ani v'loi, Levine.
You just period. No more else.
Who's the other guy? So, if you remember, one time we discussed one idea that we're going to mention very quickly. This really could be developed much further, and that is the taking the Jewish people out of Mitzrayim was akin to the birth of Klal Yisrael. It was the Leida of Klal Yisrael. And we have a concept that there are three keys that God maintains sole possession of. And that is the key of the resurrection of the dead, the key to rain. Only God brings the rain. Nobody else brings the rain. Nobody else knows when it's going to rain. So even though you hear on a report that tomorrow's going to be a terrible storm, it's like 40, 60 if you even need an umbrella, right? Or if, let's say, they say it's going to be 2 feet of snow. In the 5 towns, it was 3 inches. So, I don't know. So the answer is they have no clue. They could guess. They need to make money and they need to scare people or to hide, but they really don't know. So, but the third key is the key of childbirth. And since these are 3 keys that God maintains sole possession of, and one of them is childbirth, says Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Chaver in the Hakdama to his Haggadah called Pesach Yad, says Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Chaver that Yitzias Mitzrayim was the birth of the Jewish people, so therefore God is emphasizing, I did it. You know why I did it? Because this was your Leida, this was your birth, this was your creation, and that's why, by the way, the first makkah was dam, because the first symptom of birth is blood, and that's why the Mitzrayim screamed so loud the night of Yitzias Mitzrayim, because who screams louder than anybody else? A woman giving birth. And that's if she's giving birth to one kid. Imagine giving birth to 600,000 kids. You can imagine how loud she's going to scream. Okay, that's one emphasis, that's one shot in the emphasis on ani, because this is one of the 3 keys that they say a remez in the name of the Chassam Sofer, Pituche, Choisem, Kodesh Lashem. Pituche, the keys, Choisem, Chaya, Tchia, Matar, Kodesh Lashem. That's designated for Hashem. Okay, but let's embark on the following idea. And that is, there's a Sefer Iker de Perka, written by Reb Tzvi Elimelech Midinov, the Bnei Yissaschar, who not to be confused with the Sefer Bnei Yissaschar or the Sefer Agra de Kala, which is another Sefer of the Bnei Yissaschar, not to be confused with the group Igra de Perka in the other shul. We don't talk about it over here, but this is the Sefer. This is the Sefer Igra de Perka. It says Zoyar Bereshis Daf Ayin Ches Lech Lecha. Hashem told Avram Avinu Lech Lecha Me'artzecha U'Meladecha U'Mibeis Avicha Deloi Tishkach Beveis Adavicha. Don't stay home. Because of Haramaz, says Rav Moshe Zakuto. Rav Moshe Zakuto says, Ratzaloymar, Shelo Yene Klum Mishal Aviv. It's not a good idea. You can't eat breakfast anymore in your father's house. Shelo Yachshoiv Levarer Berurim Mibeis Aviv. So that you do not, so it's not considered a cleaning up of the house of your father, meaning Tzutze Kedusha HaKamusim Sham. What does this mean? Unclear, but says the Agra de Perka, what we learn from here is Adam Das. From here we should learn Lihizaher, to be careful. It's not a good idea to get hana from someone who's not proper. Somebody who tries to get money from people who are evil and corrupt, they will acquire for themselves bad characters. In other words, sometimes, institutions need money. You got to be very careful. Because whoever you're getting money from, whoever's supporting you, you will take on the character traits of the one providing you with the sustenance. Why? Ki koyach hapoyel benifal v'ha'adam harama ma'alalim shehasegula hamois hahu hine koyach hapoyel benifal hainu hamois v'oish hayosher b'lekichasa yoisay hamamoin v'yuchal levar hatem minara koinelat samidois rois. Meaning, basically like this: if you're a yeshiva or you're an individual and you take money from someone who has unethical business behavior, or he cheats on his
taxes.
Thank you. So then you should know that he's a ganev, and whatever Geneva, all his money is money of Geneva, and whoever he gives that money to, that money will corrupt the person who's nene from that money, and it will turn the person sour. And even if the person is a tzaddik and a yashar and a chassid, the person will become corrupt from the unethical money of the one benefiting him. And therefore Chazal tell us, you're not even allowed to exchange money from the tax collectors. The tax collectors were notorious ganavim. So if you have $1, you can't take 4 quarters from the tax collector, because that money will poison you. Okay. Elsewhere, the Igra de Perka writes, we'll see what this has to do with anything. Amar Kvoid Admar Harav HaKadosh Merenu Ramanachem Mendel.
No.
No. Ramanachem Mendel Mirimanov.
Oh, Mirimanov.
He says there's a, and this is a very frightening thing. Everybody knows today there's a very terrible phenomenon of kids who go off. Well, you should know, as much as people think it's a new phenomenon, it's as old as the hills. There were always people, for like hundreds of years already. This was an ancient phenomenon, going back 200 years. And the question is, why? You have children when they're young. Holchem lebeis rabbin, they go to the yeshiva, umasmidim b'limud terasam, and they're very studious, and they're very, they have good work ethic. Umaspalim bekavana, and they daven with kavana. V'oinim amen yehishmei rabba, v'oinim v'amen, and they have good midos. And then they grow up, and they go off with midos gruos, bittul Torah. How could such a thing happen? What about the Torah they learned when they were younger? It should have sustained them and given them strength. In other words, how do you explain the phenomenon of children who go off? And says Ramanachem Mendel Mirimanov, it's the parents' fault. And how is that? Because the parents were ganavim. And the parents went to work, and they cut corners, and they took money from the boss that didn't belong to them, which is worse than feeding them pig. So would you have any wonder if you fed a kid pig and he went off, why he went off? So same thing, you fed the kid kosher food with treif money, so the food is now treif, and whatever you feed them is going to poison them. It was unethical business. They became fat in a prohibited manner. And all the food they ate became part of their personality, and therefore they were born with bad taiva and midos gruos. And the proof is, are you allowed to bring the crop of a bird on the mizbeach? No, because it eats, right, the birds, they fly into people's reshuyos, and they steal food that doesn't belong to them, and it's not l'ratzon l'Hashem. But Hashem never told a bird not to steal, so let's make a kal v'chomer. If a bird who's allowed to steal can't be brought as a carbon, and God doesn't approve of them, alachas kam v'kama, an adam who is mitzuva on gezela, if he brings home such money and he supports his family with such money, he will turn them bad. And the proof is Avram Avinu, who is born from Terach. And as soon as he started pursuing Hashem said the first thing you got to do is get out of the house, because you're going to be eating frosted flakes that Terach bought with non-kosher money. Okay, bottom line, what do we see from here? We see from here that one should not be nene from money which was gained unethically. But I didn't gain it unethically. He gave it to me as a gift. Even so, it's not good to benefit from improper sources. Okay, so we'll get a load of this. Comes the Munkatcher, the Minchas Alazar, in the Sefer Divrei Torah, and he quotes his Zayda, the Agra de Perka, in Ois Pei Beis and Ois Kuf Chaf Vav that we just read, that a person should not try to be nene from unethical money, and that explains the phenomenon that says the Agra de Perka of children who go off because they grew up with unethical money. Well, the Munkatcher and the Divrei Torah and Chelek Aleph Ois Nun Zayin, about 4 lines from the end of number 7. V'kasav Sham b'Shem Hazayir HaKadosh Dil Molei Lo Havei Tamei Yisrael Nama de Mitzrayim Lo Haya Ban Lidei Shibud. The only reason the Jews were enslaved by Mitzrayim is because they started to eat their bread. But if they would have eaten their own bread, they would have remained above being subjugated. Meaning, they ate the bread of Mitzrayim, and it was kosher bread. But they acquired the character traits of Mitzrayim and the Midas Rois, and that is ultimately what did them in. So what does this got to do with the price of tea in China, huh? Let's take this a little further. There's a Gemara Me'ilah, Daf Yud Zayin Amud Beis. The Jews had problems, so they sent various Talmidei Chachamim to try to help them out and speak to the governor, and to no avail. And one day, the rabbis met someone on the street. His name was Ben Tamilion. Not Maximilian. What's Ben Tamilion? Anybody know who Ben Tamilion is?
Must have been a millionaire. Tamilion.
Tamilion. He was a shed.
He was a what? A shade.
He was a shed. He was a demon. And Yatzel Lekrasai Ben Tamilion. Ritzaincham Ava Yimachem. Would you like me to help you? Bacha Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon cried. Va'amar, Oy! Ma'ashivcha shel beis Abba. If a maidservant in my father's house, Nizdami la malach shalosh pa'amim, 3 angels visited her, v'ani loy pamaches, and not 1 angel visited me. What's Reb Shimon talking about? Well, who's the maidservant that 3 angels appear to?
She didn't deal with any
Hagar.
funny money.
Hagar, the maidservant of Abraham, 3 malachei Hashem appeared to her. And Reb Shimon says, but no malachim appeared to me, only this shed. But he says, Yavai hanes mikal makayim. Okay, but what can I do? I have no choice. So you bring the miracle. Says the Munkatcher, he quotes this Gemara Me'ilah, that what do we see from this Gemara? That if you need a miracle, then come as it may. If you need the shed to bring the miracle, let the shed bring the miracle. You know, when you're in trouble, you need help. Well, says the Munkatcher, this contradicts the Agra de Pirka. The Agra de Pirka says, don't take money from unethical sources because it will affect you. Because you might think, well, he gave it to me fair and square, so if I buy a slice of pizza, it's my slice of pizza. No, the slice of pizza is going to poison you. Because the person who gave you the money is unethical. So if the Agra de Pirka and Ois Pei Beis and Ois Kuf Vav says, you should be not nene from an Adam She'eno Hagon, and included in that is not even to exchange money with the tax collector. And yet, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai says, let the miracle happen from whoever brings it. So how do you reconcile that? Says the Munkatcher, I guess the only way to reconcile that is, under normal circumstances, you should try not to be nana from unethical people. But, when the Jewish people are in major trouble and they're in hot water and we have no alternative, so then, it's not like we dive into the demon, but if we have no choice and there's a demon who's willing to help us, by hook or by crook. Ach b'makam sakana kazeh. Shani, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai cried. He said, Nebuch, no malachim come to me. Hagam shoyim alumad benisim. We know Rav Shimon Bar Yochai is very accustomed to miracles. That's why they sent him in the first place. But when he had no alternative, he said, Yavei anes mikol makom, because he saw min hashamayim that no other avenue was available. So I guess we need to be saved through a shade. Okay, Ein Zeh, we find in the Yushalmi that other Rabbanim were saved through shadim. But says the Munkatcher, not so fast. Wait a second. I'm going to show you a case where even though the Jewish people's back was up against the wall, they still didn't want to be saved through shadim. When is that? Purim. Because everybody knows that, when Esther was taken by Achashverosh, there is an idea, and it's mentioned in many sources, that Esther did not actually live with Achashverosh in the beginning. But rather, what she did was, she made a shade, who was an identical image of herself. And when Achashverosh said, Esther, she said, coming, and she sent in the shade. So now the question is, so why did she ever say, that now that I'm going to live with Achashverosh on my own, I'm going to be usher to you, Mordechai? Why would she be usher to Mordechai? She never lived with Achashverosh. It was a shed. In fact, there's an opinion that Daryavesh may not have been the son of Esther. Daryavesh may have come from the shed. Hopefully next year we're going to give a whole major topic on this. Shady business. Yeah? And so if Esther sent in the shade, why was she ever usher to Achashverosh? So listen to this interpretation. To Mordechai, right. So listen to these psukim. Vayomer Mordechai lahashav el Esther. Mordechai sent to respond to Esther, right? It's still Chodesh Adar. Mordechai sent to respond to Esther. Al tidami v'nafshech. Do not conjure up in your mind. Lihimaleit beis hamelech, to escape the house of the king. Mikol haYehudim, from all the Jews. Ki macharesh tacharish ba'eis hazois. If you're going to be quiet now, revach v'hatzalah yamay leidim makoim acher. So then the Jews will be saved mimakoim acher.
From a different place.
From a different place. What's the different place? If you remain silent, the Jews will be saved from another place. Ani v'loy acher. V'adu beis avich toivedu. And you and your family will go lost. Umi yoden, who knows? And liyes kazos, for a time like this, he got la malchus. You reached malchus. So today we're quoting from all the Sefer Chasidim, the Sifrei Chasidus, the Agra de Pirka, and Menachem Mendel Miriminov, and the Munkatcher, because they say this Shiur is on J-Root and people in Brooklyn are listening. So we'll make believe we always learn Sifrei Chasidus. Therefore, all the people in Brooklyn who are listening, they'll start listening every week. Maybe they'll like the Shiur. You never know. What? We're not tricking them, They'll listen next week. Anyway, the Shiur is always unpredictable. You never know where we're going. But, says the Kedushas Levi, so Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Bar Ditchav, What does it mean? Ki im hacharesh tacharish beis hazois revach v'atzala yamel b'makom acher. Says Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Ditchev, we have a klal. Sometimes God performs miracles al yedei dvarim acherim, like we find by Rebbe, where the Caesar commanded Rebbe that he should come at Erev Shabbos, and he didn't have time to show up, so he sent the shed of the bathhouse to go for him. That's called davar acher. So when Mordechai told Esther, you need to go to the king, he didn't mean that you should send the davar acher. So therefore, says Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Ditchev, "V'chein kach amar Mordechai LaEsther hamalka, ki bevada yava yanes mikol makom." What Mordechai was telling Esther is, look, let me tell you something. This miracle is happening either through you or through a davar acher. But you need to do what you need to do, and we should do it through you. Why? Because if you're going to be silent at a time that we need you to bring the geula, and the miracle is going to come through davar acher, it ain't going to be good for you. Doesn't really elaborate what this means. So I want to share with you one of the most incredible perushim that I ever heard in my entire life, that the Munkacher quotes from Rav Naftali of Ropshitz, the Zera Kodesh. Okay, you ready? It's unbelievable. Everybody knows that Esther had the shed. So listen to this. So bottom line, we're trying to deal with the following question. The Gemara in Me'ilah says on Daf Yudzayin Mebez that Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, who had no alternative, said, okay, let the miracle come through a shed. We have no alternative. On the other hand, we have the rule of the Agra de Pirka that a person should not be nene from unethical sources. And here, Rabbi Sai, it seems like Mordechai is telling Esther, don't do it through a shed. Because Revach v'hatzala yamel b'makom acher. If you allow this miracle to come through a shade, you're going to be destroyed. So let's just set it up. We had a stira because we have the rule of the Agra de Pirka that you're not supposed to be nana from unethical sources. On the other hand, the Gemara Me'ilah says that Rav Shimon Bar Yochai is willing to accept the miracle from a shed. And the answer we gave was, look, it's always better not to be nana from unethical sources, but when your back is up against the wall, so you'll take the miracle from the shed. But the question is, here, the Klal Yisrael's back was up against the wall, so why is Mordechai telling Esther not to do the miracle through the shed? But listen to this interpretation. He says from his Zayda, the Ropshitzer. You ready? Al tidami v'nafshech lihimolei beis hamelech mikol haYehudim kiyim hacharesh tacharishi beis hazois revach v'atzala yamel b'makom acher. Why was Esther scared to go to the king? She says, I haven't been called in 30 days. So what? Send the shed. UPS. Federal Express. The Zohar says that's what she did every night. So why couldn't she do it this time? Says the Ropshitzer. Mordechai was afraid like this. If you do it now, Al tidami b'nafshech. You ready for this? The word tidami could also mean to make a dimyon, a copy, b'nafshech, of your soul. Al tidami b'nafshech. Do not replicate your soul. Meaning, don't make a shed. That's how he's interpreting the words. Al tidami b'nafshech, in order to save yourself. Why? Ki im hacharesh tacharishi. Charasha in Gemara language is incantations. If you're going to do mumbo jumbo now, kiyim hacharesh tacharish. If you're going to whisper some incantations at this time, no. If you whisper at this time, then im hacharesh tacharish beis hazois revach v'hatzala yamel yudim makom acher. Then benefit is going to come from another place. What's makom acher? Makom acher is the dark side, the sitra achra. Makom acher is the sitra achra. Revach v'hatzala yamel yudim makom acher ad kan tochen devarav. In other words, like this says the Rav Shitzer: Kiyem hacharesh Al tadami v'nafshech. Do not. Al tadami v'nafshech. Do not replicate your soul. Himalay beis hamelach mikol hayudim, to escape the king from all the Jews. Kim hacharesh tacharish v'esazois. If you're going to use kishuf at this time, revach v'hatzala yamei laYehudim mimakom acher. The Jews will be saved from the dark side. Now, what does it mean? Va'adu beis avich toivedu? Let me tell you something. It says in the Sefer Chasidim that you want to go to Kabbalists with kameos and all kinds of other things. You should know, says the Sefer Chasidim, even if they help you, your family will be destroyed. People think, he must be a big person because he could bring Yeshuas. Lav dafka. Rabbi Yaakov Hillel writes, many people are able to bring Yeshuas, but they could bring it from the dark side. There are different forces in this world. It's not always coming from the right place. That is what, says the Munkatcher, that is what Mordechai tells Esther. If Kim hacharesh tacharish v'esazois revach v'hatzala yamoy liyudim mimakom acher, then you're going to be saved from the dark side. V'adu beis avich toivedu, and you're going to destroy your whole family. So now we have a contradiction, because if Shimei was willing to accept a miracle from a shed, and Mordechai says none of this monkey business with dark side miracles, no Kabbalah here to save you from extinction. Well, the way the Munkatcher addresses this is like this. He says, Ach yesh loymar, why was Esther allowed to send this shed all the other times? Why did Mordechai have a problem every other time that Esther is sending the shade? The answer is, whenever it's efshar b'inyan acher, maybe you could do it, and we say yavai hanes b'chol makom. However, if the Chachamim understand that there are alternatives, and you could be saved mitzad kedusha, then you're not allowed to use the sitra achra. And therefore Mordechai tells Esther, do not send the shade, because he saw Baruch HaKodesh that the Yeshua was going to come dafka through her, and therefore he's warning her that if you do not utilize your ability to save Klal Yisrael and instead come onto the dark side, then you will be destroyed. Masha Enkein, in the case of Reb Shimon Yochai, Reb Shimon Yochai cried, and he saw Baruch HaKodesh that there's no alternative, and the only way to be saved is to use the shed, so he had no alternative. Okay, Mar Rabbi Sai. So we come to an amazing thing. What does this have to do with Haggadah Shel Pesach? Says Rebbeinu Shalom, V'avarti b'Eretz Mitzrayim b'layla hazeh ani v'lay malach. V'kesi go b'chor v'lay ani v'lay Sarah. V'chol ani v'lay shech. Ani Hashem ani hu v'lay acher. Who's the acher? Who's the shliach? Who's the malach? And who's the saraf? There are four people here. Who are these four individuals? So, recently I got a set of Svarim Emunas Itecha of Moshe Wolfson, Mashgiach of Tarvadas. And he quotes the Arizal, that why couldn't Hashem send a malach to take us out of Mitzrayim? The Mitzrayim was so filthy and impure that if a heavenly angel would have come down to Egypt, he would have morphed from a spiritual entity into a physical entity, and therefore God did not want to completely destroy the makeup of the malach, and therefore Hashem had to do it himself. So as for Moshe Wolfson, okay, so he didn't send an angel. So why couldn't he send, someone from the Sitra Achra, like the Satan? And what's God afraid of? Then the Satan would take a physical reality, so, Gazun Tehit, let him take a physical reality, he deserves it. Well, says Moshe Wolfson, he heard from holy people. I don't know who the holy people that he heard it from was, but he says he heard from holy people, and that the meaning of the pasuk in the Megillah of Kiyam hacharesh tacharish beis hazos roach atzayam makam acher is the makam acher is the dark side. We've already documented that some of these holy people are Levi Yitzchak of Barditchov and Rav Naftali of Robshitz, and Esther was told by Mordechai, do not make efforts to save Klal Yisrael, even through the Sitra Achra. Why? He says like this, V'yomar Mordechai le'Esther, M'loi tishtadli ba'atzalas Yisrael, then you should know the Sitra Achra is going to help you, just like he helped Reb Shimon, through Shadim, and Revach v'Hatzalah Yamin LaYudim Mimakom Acher, but it's better that it comes through you. So says Rav Moshe Wolfson, this is the meaning of the Haggadah. Ani v'loy malach. I am not an angel. Why not an angel? Because of the tumah, and then the malach would physicalize. So don't do it through a malach. Do it through an acher. No, Hashem didn't want it through an acher. HaKadosh Baruch Hu le'rotza, sharech v'atzalah tamoid mimakom acher. Well, it's very interesting. We know that there are forces of good and forces of evil. The good side obviously come from God and come from the two names of Hashem. What are the two names of Hashem? Yud Kei Vav Kei, Aleph Dalet Nun Yud. Yud Kei Vav Kei is what numerical value?
6.
And Aleph Dalet Nun Yud? 65. 26 and 65 is 91. Who's 91? Malach. Malach is 91. On the other hand, if the forces come from the dark side, the Acher, well, the Acher has two bad names. Samach Mem, which is 100, right? Because 101 beats it. Samach Mem. The other one is Lilas. Lilas is what? 480. So what's Samach Mem and 480? 580. What's 580? Saraf. So the good guy is the Malach. The bad guy is the Saraf. Saraf is a combination of Samach Mem and the Lamed Yud Pasataf. And that's the meaning. Hoitziyanu Hashem Yisrael Lo Yal Yedei Malach. Who's the good guy? V'lo Yal Yedei Saraf. Who's the bad guy? Only HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ba'atzmai Anihu V'loi Acher. Who's the Acher? The Acher is the Sitra Achra, the dark side. The Rebbeinu Shalom did not want our Yeshua to come through the dark side. After all, whenever you take something from the dark side, it always comes back to haunt you. Right. Now, obviously, we explained it more in a Kabbalistic way, and that is, you are affected spiritually from the money that you take, or from the help that you get. But even on a very practical level, whenever somebody helps you, you're subject to them, and they have a certain degree of authority and control over you. And the Rebbeinu Shalom said, well, I can't have you be meshubed to anybody, because at the end of the day, God took us out of Mitzrayim so that we should be subject to Him. Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, Asher hoitzesicha me'eretz Mitzrayim. But it comes with its benefits, because the same way, if somebody takes money from something evil, they're affected by it. When we have our Yeshua directly from Hashem, it elevated us to such a high level of Uvemayra Gadol Zu Giloy Shchina, where it elevated Klal Yisrael out of the Memtesh Arituma, and it literally put us on a different upward trajectory. And the Svarim, the Chesed L'Avram, writes that 30 days before Pesach, every day the Rebbeinu Shalom takes us out of another level of Tumah. So he basically, we were on the Memtesh Arituma, every day in the 30 days Kaidam Mitzrayim, he takes us out one level, meaning a 30th of the 49, until the Yom Tov Pesach we stand at the threshold of Kedusha, and then we slowly climb up each day one of the Memtes Sharei Kedusha, until we're Zaycha to stand on Har Sinai. So, Rabbi Yisai, let's be prepared, let's be ready. I wish everybody a good Shabbos, a good Chodesh, Yeshua's Makifos, we should talk about Zoicha, B'Nisan Nigalu, B'Nisan Asidim Ligael. Shkoyach.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.